Okay, welcome to a new episode of Out of the Blue Comes Francis Zhu. And today I have here with me David Hoffmeister.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be able to have this before you go on for a week in Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So we can do this today. That's great. I just have to say I'm really nervous. I don't even understand. My heart is pounding so hard right now, and it was so interesting. I was talking about it in my last show that every time I started to get this nervous energy or like something was, I actually really like it because I feel there is a message wants to come through or something that really wants to come through and is really strong. And my body can feel it. So whatever that is, I mean, yesterday, I shared with you a little bit yesterday how I was actually just hoping to fill out whether I have any questions, that I can ask you in a up close and personal way.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't come up with any. So just, came here with complete empty mind and thinking, we'll see what comes through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the rain, I hear the rain coming, pounding down now, and some rolling thunder, so that's beautiful too. It's like we're being rinsed and washed here, because it's pretty unusual. Usually we don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, our days are so full. I like the flow of everything. Even today, there was just so many things. It's just been so full and so rich, and yet just through the phone calls, just the simple kindnesses coming through and reassurances, and really, it's great that we can have a life where we have the spaciousness to just be present and experience that presence and feel it, and then have time for whatever comes our way.
Yeah.
So I've noticed over the past few days a lot of phone call requests were coming in, and from different parts of the country and the world. Was kind of unusual, but as I'm getting ready to leave, and there's so many things going on simultaneously, it's just, I love the spaciousness, and it just comes out, and it's just full and rich, but there's no sense of really a schedule with it. It's just, what's next? Okay, what's next? What's next? Just like a cadence.
Yeah. Maybe we can go from here, like it's almost like you're describing a mystical way of living or life that is, on the surface, or, when you look at it, it seems it could be pretty full, one action after the next, but the state of mind is a different place, almost like you cannot judge by just looking at the actions and the forms, because I came in this studio today just with such empty mind, and it's not really new to me, because I noticed from the very beginning when I start to speak in a public way, the more I just like my mind just get more and more empty as I approach the time, about when I was about to speak. And I remember the first gathering I think I did with Jason, we were going to talk about spaciousness in that gathering, and that whole day, all of a sudden, I forgot completely what spaciousness was, and I just couldn't put anything together in my mind. I thought I probably should go back to the book, the course, and read about spaciousness before I, go to the gathering. And Jason said, well, don't undo the undoing. Just allow the mind to be empty, and that just really that's something that has never really changed for me. Like So every time I come to deliver a message, I just see that this body is completely being used, and it doesn't have anything of its own that to say or to to deliver, but it just get into this emptiness and allow things to come through. So do you have anything to say about that, the empty state of mind and mysticism?
Well, it seems like the empty state of mind is directly connected with this involuntary flow. So when we are accustomed to beginnings and endings, and we're accustomed to numbers and quantities and measurements and so on and so forth, this involuntary flow just transcends all of that completely. So it would be like if somebody asked us, how many in-breaths do you have during the day and how many out-breaths? It would be like, I don't know. I mean, for most human beings, they don't count them. It's just the breath continues. It's in and out and in and out, and there's no counting. And there's not really an awareness of it. Most people are not aware of their in-breath or their out-breath during the course of a day. And when we think of things like speaking or not speaking, or active movement versus sitting still, and these things, we have categories for those. We think that those things are like under conscious control. So we have categories for things that are under conscious control, and then things that we would say are involuntary.
Right.
But to open up to the idea that everything is involuntary.
So there are things that we can feel is involuntary, like would you say our digestion. We don't really consciously do that, and there are certain things that even belongs to our body, like what we sometimes feel is our self, is involuntary too. But there are things that it seems like we put in a category as voluntary, and that's like there is a difference there. So you're saying that they're all involuntary, they're the same. As we digest food, the hair grows, and as we choose to pick up this cup of water and goes to everything, that's all completely involuntary.
Yeah, it just transfers. So, that starts to give you more and more of the lucid dreaming quality, or the dreamer of the dream quality, because everything then is the same. And these artificial, we'll say, categories are just washing away. And then as that transfers and transfers and transfers, it's approaching that idea of no control over the world you made. You don't have control over some aspects and no control over some. It's just no control over anything.
So why is that I feel the difference of the involuntary? I can't choose the color of my hair that grows out, But I feel, why is that there is a feeling that is so different? Is that just a pure something that just the mind is so asleep or so upside down, it just gets so confused it can't even tell what is voluntary, what is involuntary?
Yeah, it's just, we just recently watched that movie Lucy, where she was using more and more higher percentages of her brain, and there was that point in that movie where she had blonde hair all along, and then suddenly she's walking down, and it just kind of dropped, like the black hair just dropped down, almost like these dolls that the hair comes out, and it reminded me of the movie Simone, how the construct, the hair just kind of comes out, starts off with just a face and a bald head, and then the hair, and then you can, ching, 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 different hairstyles, and ching, 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 different dress styles. So you could say that as we become fully conscious, then we become fully aware, and there's a washing away of the unconscious mind, or the unwatched mind is what Jesus calls it. And there's this careful sense of watching, or awareness, that permeates everything. And in that sense, there's nothing to consciously try to do or to make happen. And that's very relaxing. That's the point of everything, is to just relax into that transfer of training.
So unwatched mind is the unconscious.
Unwatched, just assumed. There's things that are assumed that aren't actually true. So sometimes it's a hard word to find a category for, but you could say it's assumed to be true.
Right. I have control over my action, my next action, and that is assumed. That's unwatched assumption.
Yeah. And it's with some things, like with academia or lots of careers and things, you don't really, you're not encouraged to transfer into that way. You know, it's more, there's a lot of conditioning and reinforcement to stay in charge or stay in control. It's kind of built in with all of the disciplines and with surviving in the world. But I do think of like artistry. It was one where there seems to be an opening to kind of get in the zone. And sometimes sports, maybe even maybe more individualized sports, where there's not so much a looking out for teammates or you know, to collaborate in that way, but more individualized sports where you can kind of relax and relax and relax, and then feel the merge, where you know, you lose awareness of the body and there's just this flow. And it's very, very peaceful and it's very relaxing. I think of when I first trained many, many years ago to run a mini marathon, a 10K race, and we'd go out and just be jogging, running quite a few miles or kilometers, part of the training. But then there would just be those moments where it would just, everything would merge. And I wasn't aware of anything separate or specific, or aware of the feeling of the body. It just seemed to reach some kind of a stillness or an equilibrium or something where everything was just so still. And it was very euphoric as well. And I think there are some of those avenues where people kind of stumble upon those kind of moments and think, this is amazing. I would love to remain in this state. That's what spirituality really is about.
So it seems like what we're tapping into is this awareness that you can say it in one way is, I have no control over the world. I have no control over any of it, and it's all involuntary. But how does that fit into what I perceive is, I can't remember that lesson, that Alisa Moore's song that says, the secret of salvation that was mentioned in the Course. The gist of it is, this is what I did, and it is this that I will undo. So, which implies that everything I perceive is my will. I did it. So, I guess when I really think about it, go deep to think, okay, is this just I did all of this or I did none of it? I feel they're talking to two different selves. I have no control is the self that believes it is in the world. Is it separate individual? It's the dream figure instead of the dreamer. And in that way, the dream figure actually has no control. Everything is involuntary. But when we talk about the dreamer of the dream, then the other perspective becomes the reality, which is, I did this and it is this I will undo. So is that helpful, I guess, to talk to people about you did this and it is this that you will undo?
Well, I think it serves to a point, and then you get to a certain point or a certain stage or phase where it starts to go beyond the words. So that's really where the aim of spirituality is. And Jesus will say things like, our use for words is almost over now, and so forth. But in this involuntary flow of the miracle, it's never going to increase fear. It's always designed, to wash away fear. And so it's not so much the words that you speak, because you don't really choose the words specifically. You're choosing to tune in to an alignment. You're tuning into your intention, your purpose, and then the words even come in an involuntary way. So it takes away all concern about to speak or not to speak, or did I speak the right things. There's no second guessing, there's no looking back, there's no analyzing, no trying to figure it out or compare or contrast.
Right.
It's very, very relaxing.
It is beautiful. And I guess I just really feel inspired by this thought that we're really here to forgive. Even the words, doesn't really matter. There is no correctness or hierarchy of words. Because I do notice that there was a phase where I probably started to prefer more of the non-Jew terms, and I almost do not want to get into specifics or talk dualistic, and almost there must be a judgment underneath, and thinking, in form there are better and worse. So what I just realized now is that, the state of mind is the one that is really truly delivering a message. It's not really about the words. And the state of mind can be so steady, and you can allow the words to go wherever it wants to go and meet whoever it wants to meet at whatever level. And there is no hierarchy, and there's no better or worse. So, because that's what I observe from you, the state of mind is so high and beyond this world, but when it comes to, there is no restriction or judgment around talking about specific problems, relationship issues, health issues. It's never it's an illusion, and rise above, and and I just feel very humbled by that realization, I have to say, because I see how the mind is addicted to judgment and use different ways and to judge. And just when I saw that, any kind of preference and selection and choose, and not allow whatever in the moment, words or whatever, to come through in a complete equal way, just to see that becomes a block, that has nothing to do with the state of mind. And even that as a protection or a maintenance of a self-image, that could be a block as well. So I feel inspired by this realization. And I know you talked a little bit about this with the host of the Buddha at the gas pump show.
Yes.
I just watched today. Yeah.
Rick Archer. Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, and just as he was talking about his glimmers of it and glimpses, and we would just kind of go into it deeper and deeper. But I think you could say that with a number of things, that we have a lot of signs in this world. I've always enjoyed watching comedy shows, and typically even comedy shows in Hollywood, they have their start point, their stopping point. They have the different characters or persons that are part of it and everything. When you have an ensemble cast, they have writers. And then when the credits come, you'll see the names of the comedians or the actors and the writers and producers and directors and so forth. But actually, the funniest comedy that just goes off the chart is that called ad lib, where they're away from what the writers have written. they start to get a feeling, I think, inside that's just so funny and so humorous. And then it guides and directs. It just kind of goes in an involuntary way. And whenever I would watch these shows, they were quite famous shows, but when a character or some of the 2 or 3 of them would start to get into ad-libbing, it would just turn outrageously funny because that was part of it, that it was out of control. And they liked it, you know.
You like out of control.
Yeah, it's like our friend, what was the woman? There's a song, I Lost My Job and I Like It. Lilo,
yeah.
Right. She wrote a book. But I lost control of my comedy and I like it. You know, that's kind of the feel you get. And I think that's the same thing that we like with different interviews or whatever, where there's just a deep connection, but everything is ad-libbed. Everything is just coming so spontaneously.
Yeah.
We don't have cue cards here.
No.
Prompters and readers, you know. Yes. The non-dual way is, you know, we just don't have any of that, and there's a lightness and a spontaneity and a joy with that. And again, I think it's just allowing that to transfer to everything else. I mean, if you talk to the comedians, they would say, wow, it was an amazing show. And they would even watch the taping of it, the replay, and would just probably roll laughing at seeing it. But then, you know, going home to what seems to be a home and a personal life, dealing with the daily issues of being a human and so on and so forth, then it's not that feeling of kind of ad-libbing. But the Course in Miracles does say it is possible to listen to the voice for God all throughout the day without interrupting your regular activities in any way. It's basically saying you can do this, and you have to really be willing to do it. And I think you have to trust that it's going to happen. Because right before I came on your show, I was completing a few more calls, and one of the calls, a friend who's been working with the Course and working with our community for some time and everything, you know, had just let go of her car, and was just moments before the call had gone in to quit her job, and was feeling them very strong, except there was just some undercurrent under there, like it was still maybe in disbelief of the whole thing, even though it was feeling very guided, very prompted, and very, really, maybe exciting even of how this adventure would go.
Right.
She had told me earlier, a number of weeks ago, that she was inspired by Peace Program, actually, and was, you know, wanting to trim down. I got a call, or it was actually an email last week, the same thing. A friend of ours, saying, I feel to lighten my load and sell all my possessions and just go for it. There's like a call into that spontaneity, into that trust, and away from the seeming structures that provide safety and security.
That's it. I think that's what's behind this show as well. When I first felt the prompt of this show, and there were suggestions of the names for this show, and I was talking with JP, and he said, what do you feel you want to deliver? Like, what is really the purpose of this? And you want the name to constantly remind you. And I, you know, at that point I didn't know the name, but I thought I would like to extend the inspiration that's in the mind, that is fresh and that is out of the box. So which means not restricted to rule, or not something that is correct, only correct. I want it to be like
only correct.
Yeah, like I don't know what is correct. Just be completely fresh and inspiring, and you know, as you're saying, sometimes in this world, the problem is their duality, and we're trying to avoid one side and pursue the other side, and it's never going to happen. And it's the same, even if I want to use language in a way that it's only correct and it's not incorrect. As however I put the mark or the division, it's just never going to work. But really, the speaking becomes a way to watch judgment and to wash through all the judgment and blocks to the awareness of love, really.
Yeah.
So that's why Out of the Blue is, just out of nowhere. And that does remind me every time that, there has no rules and there's no box, and we can just allow the moment to come up, and whatever that's fresh and inspiring to be extended through this. So
yeah, it's beautiful when you can just see that you're doing it to extend an experience, and that's completely and only why you're doing it. It's not tainted with other motives. For example, if you took something just as simple as like a television show or an internet talk show or anything like that, as soon as you bring in the commercial component, as soon as it involves ratings, as soon as it involves audience and size of audience and target audience, and a woman called me with a marketing call a couple of days ago, and she was talking about Google, and she was making some suggestions, and she said, have you heard of Google Analytics? And I said, I think I might have heard the name. And she said, well, you should check it out, and I think it could help you. That's a good example of demographics and who's clicking on what and where they are, and all kinds of things, as if you can find out more specific knowledge, and it can help whatever your target audience or your marketing or whatever. And so I went on there and just came to the introductory page, and they said, yes, for a fee of only $150,000 per year, your business can take advantage of Google Analytics. And I was like, okay, well, but that was a quick, but actually, it's the purity of the motive, it's the purity of what is it for that's good. I mean, I'm heading down to Brazil, and they had ambitions of getting a lot of things, books translated, Healing in Mind, and different books translated into Portuguese in advance of my coming, and making a lot of free copies for the people to pass out and everything, but we really didn't have a real good translation of Healing in Mind. So in the end, they picked a very small little booklet, very deep and precise and concise. Purpose is the only choice, and they were able to translate that, and now I guess it's been a couple hundred copies have been printed off. They're just going to give those away. But there's a simplicity when we come to what our motive is. What is it for? And I think what is it for is a question that is designed to simplify everything and also wash away the ego. Because the ego doesn't really understand purpose, and yet it's there. The Spirit's purpose is there for us. It's this unified purpose for everything. It brings fragmented perception together into this beautiful holistic perspective. So I think it's just wonderful to just come forth with just that, the purity of that, and not have any other motives.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. There's one thing that just came to my mind as you were talking, is you are considered or recognized or seen maybe by people as teacher, as a spiritual teacher. So I guess I want to explore a little bit about teacher-student relationship and what is really about for you. I guess as the course, I remember when I was living in Sydney, Australia, and when I first picked up the course, I read that it's a self-study book, and then I started a group. I didn't want to. I couldn't really teach at the point. I just facilitated the group, and then I was hearing about you, and there was a resistance in the mind when I first heard about you, and now when I look back, I can see how just any judgment about anything really is to be forgiven for my own freedom. But at that point, the resistance was teacher, like almost like a teacher is necessary. So, but then I came to you, and I just started to just really practice whatever that was guided by you. I was actually really seeing you as a way shower, So I guess that would be interesting to maybe just hear your perspective. Do you see me as your student?
No, there comes a point where there's certain metaphors and steps, almost like rungs of a ladder, and they seem for a time to have a meaning, and they get used and they're spoken of, and the Spirit seems to be using them, and then there comes a point when everything starts to fall away, or everything, you could say merge is a better word, because you're coming into holistic perception. And then the idea of teaching, it's pulled off of bodies, so it's no longer, the concept is no longer associated with bodies. And so it's more, teaching is more associated with thought. And then this idea comes in that you're teaching all the time. Teaching isn't something that's done with the body or through a body, which when we talk about teacher, those connotations come up right away. They even have awards for Teacher of the Year, and they're talking more of academics, grade school and high school and university and so forth. But you start to see that to teach is to think.
Right.
So it's synonymous with thinking. So then you see that you're teaching all the time, and then it's not so much a matter of if you're teaching or if you're not, because you're teaching all the time, or when you start teaching or you stop because you're teaching all the time. The question then becomes, what am I teaching? And that would be based on your state of mind. You're teaching and you're learning a state of mind. And then to be a consistent teacher, you can't really ever become consistent with the ego. You could never be consistently wrong-minded. That's impossible, because it contradicts how the mind was created. You can become increasingly right-minded and then ultimately consistently right-minded, because that's a reflection of reality. So it can go that way, and it does go that way. Inevitably, it goes that way. Like Lucy, she knew that it was a very short time, maybe 24 hours that she had, but she intuitively knew that she was going into wholeness, and it was reflected at the very end when the question was asked, where is she, where is she, where is she, and then finally on the cell phone, I am everywhere. That was the answer. And so here at the Metaphysical Center, where we are right now, when we came in, fascinating place, and it has a blackboard there in the kitchen, and when I first came in, there was some chalk around, so it was like, draw a heart, teach only love, and it's still there. Nobody's erased it or spit on it or anything. It's just amazingly, for however many years, 3 years ago or so, that it's just still there as a reminder. But I would say that we teach by attitude, and if our words are in alignment with our attitude, then that just helps lend some support to the words. I was did a Buddha at the gas pump. Buddha. Buddha is Gouda. I did that interview, and I talked about words are but symbols of symbols twice removed from reality, and we were kind of having fun letting them come in a very flowing, involuntary way. It was a very joyful and experience, but I was teaching in there and saying that basically it's the attitude that does the teaching, and it's not the words.
So really everybody is teaching?
Yeah, so everyone's teaching, and they're teaching by their attitude. And whether their words are there or not, in whatever the facial expressions or whatever, it's being done at the attitude level. And it's good to think of it that way, because then you move beyond concepts of teachers and students, and the teaching begins sometime and it has an end. You know, a teaching session, as if it has a beginning and an end. It all just starts to merge together, because everything is together in actuality. Also, I was asked too about this thing of enlightenment, and I said, well, people aren't enlightened. So, you know, when the question comes, do you say you're enlightened? You know, again, I said on the interview that David isn't enlightened because persons don't get enlightened. That's, again, it contradicts like mainstream, I wouldn't even say mainstream, but probably metaphysical circles or non-duality circles, where we're talking about enlightened teachers as if there's enlightened teachers and unenlightened teachers. And one thing we know about enlightenment is that it's all-inclusive. So even within that metaphor, it wouldn't make sense to have enlightened teachers and unenlightened teachers. But when you could talk about an enlightened mind, would just be a mind that knows itself. Or an enlightened soul is a soul that knows itself. But the interesting thing about it is, what you experience as yourself, you also see everything and everyone as well. Because everything is ultimately the same. And the split mind is not a real split. And therefore, mind is all-encompassing and holistic. So again, that can be felt as an attitude, where you just feel this love and connection and oneness, and it automatically includes everything, because there could be nothing apart from that oneness. But it goes way beyond these concepts of teachers and students, and it's not surprising too that sometimes even teachers would retire because you might say that the very concept of a teacher has to be retired at some point, just like student has to be retired, or even spiritual seeker. You have to retire that concept at some point in order to experience yourself as you actually are. And that time comes. That time comes for the laying aside of those things.
I can feel it. That's beautiful. Yeah.
There's nothing to contradict, you know. I feel this connected experience, but when people say something or write something, like somebody just wrote in recently, a couple weeks ago, saying that they were very impressed with my students, and so on and so forth. But I really don't see it that way. I don't even have a student, but it's all just interpretation. There was a time when people would come and say, I am your student, and if I at that point had said, you know, I don't have students or whatever, they'd say, oh, you reject me, or oh, you turn me away, or whatever. But it's not that there actually are students that could be rejected. You know, the very idea, you know, doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And so a lot of times people will say things, and it's the same when you travel. When you and I have traveled, if I travel with a woman travel partner or with a companion or whatever, then people will say, "Oh, your wife, your girlfriend," or so forth.
Yeah.
I think the first time we went to China,
It's
that
amazing.
seemed to be, it was like, they didn't have gossip magazines, but it was like a gossip buzz. Seemed to be all around us, just showing up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's the mind perceives what it believes. So if it believes in that construct, then of course it's going to perceive it.
Right.
Regardless of what anybody says or does, it's perceived.
Yeah. It can be like I don't know, a comforting symbol or something. And these questions of relationship, you know, sometimes I feel, recently I just feel like I don't really understand this word, because it seems to, okay, are you asking whether the two bodies behave in a certain way that fit in a box, or you're asking about an experience? Because I am is mind. I can feel this I am mind and experience. And it feels like this body, okay, if you ask about the category, okay, then that's the answer, no. But experience-wise, it's very, it doesn't really fit in a category, or it can be boxed in or labeled or defined. It feels a vast connectedness when it's given in the moment. And there is some kind of quality that's the same with whoever that shows up, in different forms. But so I feel like it's almost like if I say yes, that means something. If I say no, that means something else. But the experience is completely transcend that label for relationship. It's almost like implying that I'm relating to you, or I'm relating to other people in a specific way. But it's almost like there's no consistent. There is some kind of consistency still. It seems like the form, when we talk about there is no control around the form, so it just feels like the script is playing out, and the body seems to be in certain way with a particular one for a certain period of time, but the experience is completely beyond that.
Yeah, it's a world of specifics, and it's made by the ego, and the ego asked the first question, what am I? And it made up a bunch of specifics. So it asked the question, and it made up its own answers, and it made up its own boxes and its own concepts and its categories, and they seem to be shuffled around and seem to be ever shifting and changing. So there's an uneasiness with all this shifting and changing. It's very unnatural. The mind is used to being calm and still and actually abstract. So this world of specifics is a world of deception, and all of these concepts are all part of the deception. And so even around any word, it's going to have, initially it's going to have specific connotations. So relationship, it's like when Freud would do free associations, or psychoanalysis analysts would come up with, say a word, and then they would free associate, very much like Rorschach ink, block, where they show you ink blocks and they say what you see, say what you see. It's these associations in the mind. And then as you go deeper into purpose, you start to unwind your mind from all these specifics. And the specifics then don't have the same meaning that they had before. They're more like just props, and they get used here or there to serve a purpose, but the specifics lose their meaning completely. And this is why miracles are involuntary, that even when someone's asking a question, it's usually because there's a curiosity there, but there's a fear underneath the curiosity. Because this I don't know who I am, and I don't know who you are, and I don't know what's happening to me. It's a little bit like Alice going down the looking glass, and the shapes and the sizes or proportions are different, and and there's Mad Hatters there, and it's that's about how it's a good description of this world. Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. It's kind of a good metaphor for this world. So recently, when we went down to Florida to share about the book on Wind Your Mind, we agreed to do an interview before the workshop started, and then when we were there, just as an icebreaker, our interviewer came in and she said, "Just can I ask a personal question before we get started?" And again, it's an attempt to kind of get a context or have some kind of connection, right. Or even if it's a conceptual understanding. And so the question then came out before the cameras were rolling and everything, are you together? And I remember you just kind of looked at kind of like, curious questions, and then, are you two a couple? In other words, that was the meaning of the question, and then you shook your head no, and then it's like, oh, okay. And then that was a conceptual thing. It really, nothing ever stops at that level of specifics. But it can be just, that's a context. But really, I've said that for years, like, are you a couple? I would come back with another question, a couple of what? And they would go...
A couple of
they
persons.
just weren't ready. They weren't ready for the return question. They wanted a yes or no answer to the first question. And I'd answer the question with a question, a couple of what? And they'd be like...
The what is a real question. Are you a person?
What
a
are you?
Right.
is a real question.
Right.
In fact, Ramana Maharshi would say, that's such an important question that he based his entire pathway to self-realization on that one, who am I?
Who am I?
So it's an important question. But if that's an assumption, it's the assumption of personhood. It's the assumption that everyone's a mask. Is it a single mask or a couple of masks? Or is it a group mask? Are you a group? Are you a community? Those are the kind of things. There's a bit of fear underneath all the questions, because the mind doesn't really understand what the question really is. And the questions, as Jesus says in the Course, aren't really real questions. They're ego statements.
Right.
So just imagine, you've got 7 billion people going around, and what we think are, real questions between the 7 billion are just the ego restating its basic assumption of separation. So when you put it in that context, it just gives a whole new twist to it. And then you see a movie like Her, which, is all about opening up past that fear, coming to true, deeper connection, a lightness, a laughter, a trust, an intimacy, and then that still starts to grow stronger and stronger until, it's like, were you talking to somebody else? How many? Well, she's saying I'm doing simultaneous conversations, and it starts to multiply way beyond the comfortable confines of interpersonal relationship, and it goes way, way, way beyond that. And the same with the movie we just saw, Lucy, another Scarlett Johansson movie. And then I just got off to a phone call, and they apparently, along with Lucy, she's released 2 movies at the same time. The other one's coming, but under
the skin.
Under the skin or something like that. Okay. So I was told you've got to see that one too.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, another Scarlett Johansson film to see, but underneath it's that washing away of the questions in the end.
I love it. I tell you, I'm actually really touched by what you're saying, because I see this is what we say as no compromise, because it's not about who is right and who is wrong. When people ask a question, I'm not here to say there is no persons and this question does not make sense to me. It's about love and connection, and just really see what's underneath all of that. And Jesus said in the book, never don't forget how frightened your brothers are. And just remember the purpose of everything is about love and connection, and it's not about being right, proving anything. Even that, like, just someone asks a question, and that's where comes back to what we just talked about. Like the love comes down to wherever that it meets, where the mind is at and has opening, and in that everything become clear and seen as what they are, because nothing really needs to be, corrected except this vision, this awareness, that doesn't see what is really going on.
Yeah.
So, thanks for that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful insight. It's a beautiful wisdom that you don't have to correct anything or anyone, and then there's this gentle watching. There's a lightness. There can be some smiles and some light, gentle laughter with it, but there's not a sense of trying to prove anything or be right about anything.
Right, because that's really what we're teaching. We're not teach the right to be right in this world or in anything, because there's nothing that's more important than what's underneath all of it. That's love.
Yeah.
Even the Course, like when Jesus said to Helen, this scribing 7 years of effort, and this amazing book is nothing compared to my love for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing that after all of that, that's really what it was all about. And this interview I did for Buddha at the gas pump, it's whenever you come together and it's this kind of a meeting in the mind, and there's these deep kind of almost ontological, philosophical questions that will come up. But the presence of love that is there, that just infuses every word, and the gentle lightness and the laughter, that's really what the teaching is. And then if you follow it, you can follow some very deep directions. Like it's all pointing to unification. And it's leading away from doubt and fear and skepticism, and it's pointing into acceptance and simple kindness and simple respect. And we have to feel grateful that there's this context of even community is just another context. It's nothing special or different. There's nothing special about it at all, but it's just a context, to teach what you would learn, extend the attitude that you would keep in your own awareness. And it's a great opportunity for that. And I think we both enjoyed it, and I think everyone that's come. I just watched the La Casa de Milagros video.
Coconut TV
Coconut
that
TV.
Maria put together. She just visited our vibrant community in Mexico and put together this interview. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I could feel that there was so much sharing of the gratitude and appreciation for that. And it's something that we cultivate. We just carry with us in our hearts. So when you and I have gone to China, again, there are many people there, and I've always had fun saying when we went over there, it was like the Beatles, when they first came to America, there was so much attention and swirl of things going on and everything, but we were just really having fun with all of it. I did say before going, I said, it's John and Yoko going, and so just enjoying it like they seem to do pretty good. I mean, it would get to them occasionally, but it would always be something personal. But they were aware of the vastness, I think, that was behind it all,
right,
and would stay kind of tapped into that as best they could. And for us, it's that's our life. It's not, we're not trying to get a glimmer here and there. It's about truly staying and extending that all-inclusiveness, that vastness, with everything and everyone, regardless of whether it's an interview or going out to dinner. Nowadays, I'm sure if we went back to China, even in the time since we were there last time, it would even be more surreal than before, and maybe even more comical, like that movie that Scarlett Johansson did, Lost in Translation, with Bill Murray. And
it actually didn't feel a lot of loss in translation when we first went there. I feel there's almost a universal language that was so loud, that was present. People could hear you, it doesn't really matter. You just like, they look at your eyes and they cry. I just watched that with amazement. People just cry and break apart and couldn't be away from you because they felt something that's not really in words and in language. Yeah,
I think it's, when we talk about it being involuntary, the miracle's involuntary, what that really means in practical terms is you have to be clueless really about everything. You have to stay clueless, and it's really not hard, because it's easier to be clueless than to think that you have a clue.
Right.
It's much harder to think that you have a clue, because you'll get into expectations and you'll get into all kinds of fear and worry and anxiety. But you just don't assume that. It's fun to practice that with everything. Like it's fun going to the airport and not being absolutely sure the plane will take off, and that's a fun experience. And then in the rare chance when the plane doesn't take off, you're like, okay, it's right in the flow of everything. You're not assuming anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that too in crossing into different countries. I never assumed that this body would go into another country. It's just almost like you're just pleasantly surprised about everything because you're so clueless. You're like, oh, well, this is the way it is. Oh, this is the way it is. Oh, this is the way it is. You can stay in that kind of childlike sense of wonder with everything, and then nothing really can go wrong. You can't really be late, or you can't be early, so there's no anxiety around either of those. You can't really be delayed at all. It's like that movie Lucy. It was all the human definition is all tied in with time. And if you are clueless about time, then you might say you're fully who you are, but it's certainly not human. It certainly far transcends the human being, and that's a wonderful thing. So I like that, and I know that takes trust. I just read an article a day or two ago where the woman, is it Sophie Capra, or the woman who shot, lost in translation,
Oh yeah, Coppola.
Sophia Coppola. She was describing that whole process where she had in her mind, she'd lived over in Japan, so she had a lot of experiences, and the hotel, she had stayed in the hotel there and lived at that hotel, so they allowed her to film in the hotel, and she was so happy to get Scarlett Johansson on board to do it and everything, but she just was not sure about Bill Murray. Because she said nobody knew whether he actually would show up, come to Japan to film. So they got the whole crew there, she's there, they got the hotel, Scarlett Johansson, they'd get everything, the whole movie's planned, but nobody really knew if he would actually show up. And yet they went ahead with all their preparations as if they were going to shoot a movie. And then they were happily surprised when he did show up, and then and the movie went on. But it's nice when you can stay in the cluelessness, and you can that's really staying in the moment, and not thinking what's coming next, or how things are supposed to go, and all of those constructs and judgments. That's where the difficulties always come in, because there's always something, like Jesus says, you always add a little bit to the script, or you attempt to add, you always add something. The ego is trying to add something in all the time. And that's where these expectations get generated. But there's no need to persist in that way of living.
Thank you so much. I really enjoy this.
Yeah, me too. Me too. We just show up.
Yeah.
And it's great that you're doing this show, because I know we are scheduled to show up at quite a few places this year, and yeah.
Yeah, you have such a busy schedule. Brazil, and here Strawberry Festival, Mexico, then Ireland, Scotland,
We've
Finland.
got California in there in
Right,
September
I forgot
too.
that.
Yeah, Bay Area.
And the whole Europe, and then the whole South Africa.
Yeah. Yeah, which is nice, because for me it's got a surreal quality. It's more like just observing it, and it's not. I don't feel like I am moving. It's just it's like the
scene.
The scenes are shifting, but it's very much like when you're watching a movie, or you're viewing a photo album or whatever. You feel quite stationary, and then it's just coming and passing and passing and passing. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Out of the blue comes Francis Blue.